feel like that's what makes motherhood. Like we have these
Mm.
opportunities to take scenarios and decide, how am I going to look at this? How am I
Mm.
going to choose to perceive this and walk in it? And that moment to moment decision of, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful for this.
Welcome to the Happy Homebirth Podcast, your source for positive natural childbirth stories and your community of support, education, and encouragement in all things homebirth and motherhood.
Breech birth is supposed to be rare, right? How would you feel if you had more breech babies than head down babies? Hey there, happy home birthers, and welcome to episode 281 of the Happy Home Birth Podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin Fusco, and this week we are speaking to Stephanie Case, who has had twice as many breech babies as she's had cephalic presentations, which is head down. Stephanie is mama to 3 under 3, wife, and online business coach from Greenville, South Carolina. She's married to her husband, Michael, of 7 years with 3 girls, twin toddlers, and a baby girl. She is a huge believer in trusting your God given intuition in birth. And we are going to hear about that in this week's episode. All right, I just want to remind you, if you are ready to begin preparing thoroughly for your home birth, childbirth education, Happy Home Birth Academy is available to you right now. Use the code podcast for a 10% discount. That link is in the show notes, and there is more information inside of our educational tidbit segment about the type of information that you will be gaining in this full curriculum childbirth education course. All right, let's jump in. Please remember that the opinions of my guests may not necessarily reflect my own and vice versa. And this show is not medical advice, it's an educational tool. So continue to take empowered responsibility for your health and your family. Stephanie, thank you so much for coming on the Happy Home Birth Podcast.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, I'm thrilled to have you. And we have two fascinating birth stories to talk about today. Before we do that, would you mind taking just a moment to introduce yourself and your family to the listeners?
Yeah, so I'm Stephanie Case. I am from the Greenville, South Carolina area, and I live here. I have my husband. We've been married for almost 8 years now. I have twins that are currently now 3.5, which is crazy. It's been that long. And then I also have a 10-month-old baby girl, and she is 10 months old right now. She was born July of 2024.
Oh, so sweet. Oh, just the most fun, exciting ages. I love that.
Yeah.
Three little gals. So,
Yes.
okay, so these two stories are kind of like I don't know, everybody's like, whoa, that's a surprise. Like the first thing that you experience, twins, surprise. And then, as we'll talk about in a little bit, your second birth, also some surprising things happening there. So that's one of our themes, surprise. Would you mind taking us back to the beginning when you got pregnant for the first time? What was that experience and journey like?
Yes. So I got pregnant and I had already been thinking that I wanted kind of like a more natural birth, but honestly, like knew absolutely nobody who had done anything different than have the traditional route of going to the hospital, right? And so I figured that that's what I was going to do. But as I started researching it more, I was like, I actually really think I want a home birth. And I still remember telling my husband, and he was like, "Wait, what? Like we don't like I like had no I didn't even know much about it. I just read about it. And I was like, but I think that's what I want to do. I think that's where I'm being led to go. And he got on board very quickly after that. And we started planning a home birth. And because of that, and because of the research I was doing too, I was like, I don't see a need to have an ultrasound early. It's either to determine your due date, which I was very confident of, or to see if there's multiples, which I was like, psh, like there's definitely not. Like there's no twins in our family. Like I'm not worried about that. So I didn't have an ultrasound until 18 weeks. And that's when I found out that I actually had twins. So I went through almost half my pregnancy, like having no idea that there were actually two babies in there. And so really, so with that pregnancy after that, I continued planning a home birth. I was in Ohio at the time, and my midwife had done multiple twin home births, and she felt comfortable with it. And so we kept going forward. I did go into preterm labor, which we can talk more about, but I went into preterm labor, ended up transferring into a hospital. And so yeah, I mean, that's kind of like what my pregnancy journey looked like overall. Like, super honestly, I feel like that pregnancy, in some ways was a lot easier than my second pregnancy. I felt so great. I felt so strong. And yeah, it was just big surprise. Halfway through, I got it on camera. I posted it on TikTok, and went viral with like 10 million views or something
No
crazy.
way.
Yeah, like my reaction to like seeing my husband film. He's like, I just want to see you seeing the baby for the first time. And little did he know he was going to film me finding out there were twins. It was just like
Wow.
pure like excitement. Like in my mind, I was like, wow, like I have two babies. Like God gave me two babies. Like this is crazy. Like just so, so happy.
Wow. That is so beautiful. And how wonderful that you had a care provider who was like, "Oh yeah, no, this is something that I have experienced. This is something that I'm comfortable with." That had to feel really good.
Oh yeah, for sure. And she had been trained like in breech and stuff too. So it's like if one of the babies was breech, like she was comfortable with that. So yeah, it was definitely a very empowering experience in like pregnancy. She was very supportive of like what I wanted and didn't like doubt me necessarily. And she still like brought a lot of helped me like just or not helped me decide, but brought education to me and showed me like here's what we normally do around this time. Like you can decide if you want it or not. So it was just, I remember I actually initially started at an OB and I went to one appointment and it was a lot of pressure to already do things that I didn't want to do. And I was like, and they were like, your baby is going to be fine. Like there's no risk to it whatsoever. And that was already a red flag to me. I was like, you're telling me there's absolutely no risk to anything. There's risk to every single thing in life. I was like, I'm done with this. And that's when I found my midwife and just switched.
Mm. Oh, wow. That was such a smart move. Like just that idea of there's no risk. Like
Yeah.
that's not true. That's not true for home birth. That's
100%.
not true.
Right.
Like
Right. Yeah. Both sides. Mm-hmm.
so yeah, that's beautiful that you knew at that moment like, yeah, we're not
Yeah.
doing this.
Yeah. No.
Wow. So okay, so but that pregnancy, did you feel comfortable throughout the pregnancy? What was it like having two babies growing inside of you?
Yeah, I mean, it was hard. I think it's hard because it was my first pregnancy, so I didn't really know like have anything to compare it to. But so I gave birth to them. I was almost 35 weeks, and I was measuring at that point 10 weeks ahead as far as
Wow.
like yeah. So I was definitely very large, especially as a first time mom. But my second pregnancy definitely felt a lot lighter, which was
Mm.
really nice. Yeah, but
Yes.
it was like, oh, this is great. I don't feel as big. like,
Got some space
um,
here.
yeah, but overall I felt great. I learned so much too. I feel like it put me down so much more the path of holistic living, learning more about diet and like eating clean. And because up until that point, like I had been interested in it for a couple of years and started to go that way, but hadn't really done a whole lot with it until I got pregnant. It was like, okay, like I'm doing this. I'm doing a home birth. So I'm gonna learn like how to eat enough protein. And I definitely had a lot more nausea in that pregnancy. So like with two babies. And so I learned a lot though about managing it like with my diet when I'm eating and yeah, so I feel like overall I felt really great in my pregnancy then. Like it was really nice.
Wow. And then as you got towards the end, you said you went into preterm labor. What was that experience like?
Mhm. Yeah, so I still remember I was up late, like, on my phone researching something. It was something related. I think it was related because my blood pressure started getting a little bit high, like, not crazy, but just
Mhm.
enough where, like, "Okay, like, just keep an eye on it." And I was, like, researching what to do, and yeah, so I was up way too late, and I remember, like, I felt this pop inside my belly, like, noticeably, and I was like, that was different. And then sure enough, like my water had broke and I started having bloody show. And so I went to the bathroom and then I immediately woke my husband up and I'm like, I think this is what this is. And I was like freaking out because
Mm.
obviously like I'd been planning and like dreaming of having a home birth for so many months and realizing, okay, this is probably a little too early to stay home, at least from my comfort level. And our communicated plan was at least 36 weeks, and I was still a little over a week from that. So we're like,
Yeah.
okay, gotta transfer in. And so I ended up calling my midwife. We got transferred in. It turned into like chaos. Our dogs were like, what is happening? Like I had no hospital bag packed. So like
Yeah.
my husband was just throwing stuff in his suitcase. And we ended up going to the hospital. And from the time my water had broken to the time I delivered both babies, it was 4 hours. So very fast. And when I first got to the hospital, there were two doctors there. And one of them was like, well, it's twins. So you're just gonna have to have a C-section. That's just how it is. I think the look on my face and also my midwife was a huge advocate for me there. And really pushed on that a little bit. And there's 2 doctors. One of them was a little bit older, and he was the one saying that. And then there was a doctor that he was like a little bit younger, a little bit, and he had also just been like trained on Breech and stuff. I think he was a little more comfortable with the idea of that. And so he was like, well, I'm willing to like let you try, right? I hate that phrase, but
Love
that's
it.
what
But
they
yeah, that's
say.
what he said.
We'll let you trial of labor, right?
Mhm.
We'll let you try if you compromise and you get an epidural, because they wanted me to be like hooked up or whatever. And I was like, okay, like I was fine with that. I was like, at this point, I was close to transition. Now that I know more and like had my home birth, I was definitely like in transition, and I could not even like comprehend anything when I was in like the contractions were immediately like a few minutes apart, like very
Wow.
fast, very sudden. So yeah, so I got an epidural at like 10 centimeters, like literally got it. And they're like, oh, you're ready to push. And I'm like, okay.
Perfect.
Yeah. I mean, definitely didn't slow things down though. They were born
Yeah.
like an hour later.
Jeez.
Had them both vaginally, which I'm so grateful for. So it definitely kept a lot of options open for me too, like with my third baby and getting to plan a home birth and not think about like, oh, a VBAC and all of that. But yeah, I mean, that's really like the short rundown of what happened, and just so grateful. My midwife definitely was a huge advocate for me in like, they allowed her to come in as my doula in they make you
Mhm. Mhm.
deliver in the operating room when it's twins, because of like, they want to, mitigate any risk or whatever. And so they allowed her to come in though, like, and be there
Wow.
with me. And like, so, even though like it wasn't what I wanted necessarily, she was still like there with me. She, was sitting there like kind of watching, and you could tell he was like, oh, she's like not sure that this is actually going to work. Like, I'm going to like try to make this happen for this mom that. And so
Oh.
I feel like it helps a little
Yeah.
bit, like
Mhm.
getting a vaginal birth and still having that happen. But yeah, man, it was just crazy afterward. I'm like, what just happened? Like 4
Yeah.
hours in.
Oh my goodness, 4 hours, 2 babies, like, they're out, they're here, and
Yeah.
was there any type of, like, once they were born, were they immediately with you? Did they have to go to the
Mm.
NICU? What was that like?
Yeah, so this is where even like I didn't know a lot about what even was normal or what like I could advocate for myself, but
Mm,
I got maybe like 30 seconds with each baby. They were wrapped in a blanket. I got to see their face, and they were all both taken to the NICU. And
mhm,
looking back, like even their own guidelines say like, if as long as they're not in distress and need to be like hooked up to anything, like the best thing for them is skin to skin with mom. And so that's something like that was so redeeming with my home birth, of like getting to immediately hold my baby and just sit
yeah.
there and be like, oh, because it took about the time I gave birth to them, it took about 4 hours for me to go see them again after that. And
Oh,
so it's just
wow.
like, and so I think, so looking back, I'm like, okay, I could have been like, nope, don't take my babies. Like, just leave them here as long as they're okay. But I will say that the experience as far as like the nurses there were so sweet. They were so
Mm,
encouraging, so helpful. Like that was so encouraging because it got so thrown off from like what I originally wanted. And
yeah.
yes, there was a nurse or two that what did make some comments about like, oh, this is why you don't like plan a home birth or whatever. But overall, like nurses were so sweet. Like they were so helpful, and like with breastfeeding, they were definitely super encouraging of that. The doctors necessarily weren't, or the leading doctor was not encouraging of that, but having that encouragement from them was so sweet. And once I could get down there and be with my babies, it was like, oh, like,
Mm.
yeah, it's just the best thing.
Wow. So once
Yeah.
that birth experience was over and you're in this postpartum
Mhm.
state, was there a lot to process in how that unfolded?
Yeah. It's almost like I feel like I was sitting there, because I remember sitting there pumping, and I was like, what just happened? Like, 'cause it
Mm,
was so fast. It was 4 hours start to finish. Like, and I feel like I barely had any time to like process it. And so, yeah, even going from giving birth to seeing my babies, like that time period, I realize now from pictures it was 4 hours. But even in the moment, I think it went by a lot faster. And also because I was sitting there with my doula being like, what just happened?
yeah.
Like yeah, it went by so fast. It was crazy.
Right, like, your brain is, like, trying to catch up with what just went
Yeah.
down with your body.
Mhm. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, okay, so you enter motherhood with these 2 beautiful girls. What was that like, adjusting from not being a mother to now, like, I'm a mother to two? How was that in the newborn and
Mm.
then and onwards phases?
Yeah. Yeah, so they spent about 2 weeks in the NICU, and which again, a lot of that was due to me wanting to breastfeed, and I had so much encouragement again from the nurses, from lactation consultants at the hospital, and then one that I had hired outside the hospital. She was able to come. This was also, well, kind of towards the end of like COVID restrictions and stuff. And so they were still very strict about visitors. But one of our visitors was our lactation consultant. She was like, "You guys are doing amazing. Like, keep going at it." And it was like the second day after I'd given birth, the leading doctor on the NICU floor told me, he's like, "You're not going to make enough milk for two babies. You're never going to sleep again. You're never going to eat again." Like, word for word told me that. And I remember just going back. We were staying in the care by parent room. Well, my hospital room at first, and then the care by parent room. And I was like, literally everyone else is telling me that they're doing amazing. Like, people who are so educated in like breastfeeding. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. Like, this is what I want to do. For me, I knew it would make like twin life so much easier going home, not having a million bottles to clean all the time and dealing with all of that. And I just wanted to make it as much as I could, like, be proactive in getting them to learn to latch so that when I got home, it'd be easier. So yeah, so the first week was a lot of battling that back and forth. The second week, I think they started to realize, okay, she's kind of serious about, like, I was literally living at the hospital. I left the hospital like 4 times in 2 weeks. It was literally felt like Groundhog Day every day.
Mhm.
But I stayed there, and because I didn't have any other kids or anything at the time, and was able to be there at the hospital. And we ended up coming home, and I remember they gave us stuff to like fortify milk. So it was a transition of like, they had a tube that they were tube feeding from some, and then they would breastfeed some and go back and forth. And in order to leave, we had to give them bottles. So we gave them bottles for like a day. And then they were like, "Okay, you're good to go home." So they let us go, came home. I literally trashed the bottles. I was like, "I don't need this." And they did. It was literally like a dream coming home, like being in our own home now, in our bed. I had a little bassinet for them, getting to nurse on demand so much easier. And I almost feel like that experience made like those first months in the newborn phase, and even like just the baby phase, like, I had so much gratitude for, like, I don't have to be at a hospital in the NICU, like, around the clock, hearing all these beeps and hearing all these things going on, and them telling me things that I'm like, I don't know, like, this isn't lining up with what other people are saying, or, like, it's just all over the place. And yeah, so just so much gratitude for that. And I do feel like it made, even though like moving into our second baby, like, I can see how it was so much harder because I was waking up so much more. Their feeds were so much longer, but it did make it easier in a lot of ways. And I just have so much gratitude for that season. It made me
Mm.
like love it so much more.
Oh my goodness, Stephanie, that is just it's just like so heartwarming to hear and it's like, wow, you really took that experience and just internalized it in such a beautiful way and have such a beautiful
Mm.
perspective of it. And that's what I feel like that's what makes motherhood. Like, we have these
Mm.
opportunities to take scenarios and decide, how am I going to look at this? How am I
Mm.
going to choose to perceive this and walk in it? And that moment to moment decision of, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful for this. I'm so grateful to be home. I'm so grateful to be nursing these two babies. I'm so grateful, just that gratitude that's life changing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm just so grateful. I went on to breastfeed them for about 2 years. So, about halfway through my second pregnancy. And even now, look back, I'm like, wow, that was just so sweet. And I'm so grateful that I like had the support that I needed in those first couple of weeks to keep going with it. And yeah, it was so sweet. And I look back and I'm so proud of myself too. I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, I actually did that.
Yes, that's huge. Like, what a huge accomplishment, what a victory. And
Hmm.
it's beautiful.
Yes.
So gosh, okay, so you had this incredible experience, and then what was it like deciding to become pregnant for the second time?
Yes. So actually in the midst of this, so I also run an online business, and I was getting to the point where we wanted to move to Greenville, South Carolina. My husband, because of my business was doing well, he was gonna quit his job, move to Greenville, and we were basically gonna start our life in Greenville as a family because we always wanted to move down south. And so moving here, when that happened, I remember being like, I got to find out who's going to be my midwife because I'm like, I still want a home birth again. And again, like so grateful for the way it unfolded in a lot of ways because it gave me more options with picking a midwife. And I remember like I do immediately doing research on like all the different midwives, like figuring out who I wanted. And then I came across my midwife and I was like, okay, I think she's the one. I like met up with her before I even got pregnant. Like around the time we were thinking about getting pregnant. I'm like, I know we're gonna get pregnant soon. I just want to make sure. I just so badly wanted like a home birth and I wanted it to be with like who the person like I wanted the midwife who I really wanted. I wanted to make sure that I had her like secured, right? And so, yeah, so I did a lot of research on that and just knew like I remember going into it, definitely being more nervous because I went into preterm labor with twins. I was like, okay, what if my body like doesn't make it full term again? And what if like just like all of those types of scenarios, just as someone who like I obviously like for if I need to for my babies I'll go in, but I would much rather be in the comfort of my home and like not be talked to and like be able to labor with all of my own things and welcome my baby at home. And so I feel like that was the biggest thing in pregnancy the second time and like going into it, definitely feeling more nervous about that. And also, I mean, this is a whole other topic, but we also went through it. If anyone else has, at the like right after I found out I was pregnant, we moved into a very moldy home, and it kind of opened our eyes to like the house we had been living in also had a bad mold problem, and I started having symptoms from that as well, like through my pregnancy. And so there was definitely some challenges with that, and just a lot of sensitivities that developed from that. Um, but I am so grateful. Like I did, my pregnancy overall was very smooth. Kind of similar to my twin pregnancy. I would say a little bit less nausea, like for pregnancy related nausea, which is really nice. I feel like I started feeling just like heavier towards the end of my pregnancy. I think just because like I started realizing too with my first pregnancy, my pelvic floor definitely wasn't as strong. And so, yeah, I think that played a little bit into that as far as like towards the end of my second pregnancy. But yeah, I mean, really just I was so excited to like plan another home birth again and
Mm.
excited to experience birth and postpartum with a singleton this time and see
Yeah.
what it was like.
And be home. And
Yes,
do it
and be
at
at
home.
home. Yes, 100%.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you had already selected your midwife and you met up with her and you were like,
Mhm.
"Yep, this is the one."
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And so that care
Mm.
with your singleton went as expected?
Totally. Yeah. Very similar. Like she was very like, here's what we normally do around this time in pregnancy, very supportive of my choices. I did do an earlier ultrasound because I was so nervous it would be twins again because it was fraternal twins, which is actually great for like for birth. It does make it more straightforward because they have their own sacs, own placentas, like that was nice, but because it's like genetics, it means that my chances of twins are like 1 in 12 again. So I was like, I need to know as soon as possible if we're going in with 1 or 2. So I did figure that out a little bit sooner. And yeah. So then really from there, I felt again just so supported from my midwife. I wanted someone who was going to be a little bit more hands off and just like very would honor like whatever choices that I was making, whatever like decisions that I wanted. I wanted a midwife that would respect that and also someone who was just a little bit more on the side of like very intuitive and like trusting that our bodies were like made to do this and a little bit less like very still obviously will notice if something seems a little bit off, but taking a pause first before
Mhm.
just jumping in. So yeah, she was amazing.
Oh, that sounds great. That's so wonderful.
Mhm.
So, all right. So, is there anything else in this pregnancy that you want to share about before we get towards the end and jumping into your labor story?
Hmm. I don't think so. I mean, yeah, as far as I knew, at least going into this, like I had no idea. I had no reason to believe that she was anything but head down and ready to go. And I think the only other thing is going into labor, I was also nervous. I was like, is this going to be a fast labor again? Like my first labor was so quick, which I think premature can tend to be a little bit faster. So I think that played into it. But even like as a first time mom, like having a 4-hour labor, I was like, I could do that. I could do that again tomorrow. Like that was nothing. And then, yeah, going into this experience, I was like, I wonder what this is going to be like. Like, is it
Yeah.
going to be similar or different? And it turned out to be very different.
Very different. Okay. All right. Well, let's
Yes.
hear about that. So, we're at the end of your pregnancy at this point.
Mhm.
What was the onset of labor like?
Yeah. So what's interesting is I think through this labor experience, I also discovered I think I'm someone who just gives birth a few weeks early, typically. And so like I went into labor, I was 37, like 37 weeks and 4 days. I started having some like early labor. Just feeling kind of crampy. I had a little bit of bloody show, but there was no like consistent contractions for like a day. And then it started to get consistent one morning and then they kind of went away. And I'm like, I don't really know what's happening. I told my photographer and midwife, but it happened for a few days. And then, yeah, and then I woke up. It was a Wednesday morning around 7. It had started waking me up like every 30 minutes throughout the night. And then around 7 is when they got to like maybe 5 or 6 minutes apart. And so I was like, okay, like we'll see how fast is it going to be. Like I feel like this is so. I was exactly 38 weeks, so definitely just a couple weeks on the earlier side, still within normal. But that was definitely very interesting to learn. Be like, okay, my body is like that's what I can probably expect. Like my
Mhm.
body just cooks my babies a little faster. And so, yeah, I was just so I remember, like, when labor started too, I remember just started crying and just being just, like, so grateful again that, like, I made it to that point because there were so many times I was like, "What if I don't? What if my body just, like, doesn't?" I don't know. It's like, I want a home birth so bad. I don't wanna have to go in again, and, yeah, so definitely very healing there to, like, be in labor and be at home and be like, "Wow, this is awesome." Yeah, so I would say after a few hours, so I think it was around 10 to 11, it started to feel like I was like, "Okay, this feels the same intensity as, like, right before I went into transition with my first labor after, like, a couple of hours." So I was like, "Okay, this feels very similar." My midwife lives about an hour from me, so I was like, "I'll go ahead and let her know, maybe at least come to the area even if, like, it's not happening quite yet." But my labor ended up lasting until I had my baby around 9 PM that night. So it was very long active labor, and I remember at first, we had every reason to believe that she was head down. Like there's nothing to think that she had flipped and that she was breech. And for me, I didn't get any cervical checks during labor because one, they're just so painful during my first labor. And for me, it wouldn't have changed where I'd want to give birth. And that was something that I had even told my midwife. I'm like, if she's breech, like, I just really don't wanna have to go to the hospital because of that. Like, I trust my body so much. I know that in South Carolina I don't even know everything about how it's regulated or whatever, but it is, like, you're not supposed to plan a breech home birth here in South Carolina. But for me, I was like, "Well, we believe she's head down, like, there's no reason to, like, check or whatever." And so I was like, I don't want anyone checking me, and I don't want it to throw off, like, be like, "Oh, you're only 2 centimeters." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness," because it has nothing to do with, like, where you're at in labor. And so, yeah, so we figured after it got to, like, a little bit it was, like, in the afternoon, I remember thinking, I was like, "She's probably sunny side up or something like that, where she's in a funky position and she's, like, having a hard." I feel like I was working so hard and she was having a hard time just, like, getting in the right place but still, like, no thought that she was breech. We're like, "Oh, like, definitely still head down." My midwife was like, "Yeah, I think based on what I'm feeling, it feels like she is sunny side up and that she's just not, and so it's probably just you're working hard to try to turn her or get her down." So, yeah, so it was about 14 hours of more active labor. Definitely, like, I feel like it was definitely a lot harder than my first one, and still, like, I remember going through it and being like, "This is not what I envisioned in my mind." Like, you see all the, like, just super easy, they seem super peaceful home births, and those are still absolutely incredible, but definitely it was hard, and it definitely pushed me to that very edge of, like, "Can I keep doing this? Like, this is
Mm.
crazy." Like, but I feel like though I actually did video most of it. My husband did. I was not aware enough to, like, video anything, but it was very cool to look back and even think about, like, the different points of labor and like, how it felt similar, like and now I can recognize with my twin labor, I'm like, "Oh, that's what it felt like to be in transition. That's what I was going
Mm.
through like when they were about to give me the epidural. It's like that was the point of labor I was at, and I could see that more clearly in my home birth. But transition lasted more like an hour and a half, like that transition period of like, yeah. So I do remember it was definitely harder and a lot longer and definitely way more intense. And I got to the point in transition. It happened. Actually, did it happen my first labor? I think it might have. Like I was just shaking so much and I could not calm my body. And like it just started making contractions so much harder.
Mm.
I remember my midwife being like, "Do you want to try getting back in the water?" Because I tried getting in it before, and then I got back out, and I was like, "Yes, that sounds amazing." So they got the water going for me again in the bathtub, and I hopped in, and that immediately calmed me so much, and I feel like just allowed my body to totally relax. And then it was like an hour later, like my body kind of got out of that shaky like transition, like not able to relax. And then I ended up giving birth to her, and it was just so funny because, yeah, at this point, we still thought she was head down and she was just trying to make her way out. And I was in the bathtub and my photographer and midwife, I remember like, so I waited until like I literally couldn't not push, like the fetal ejection reflex is what I was waiting for. So I only pushed like 2 or 3 times really.
How beautiful. Like
Oh, it
that
was awesome. Yeah.
that really does
So
seem
great.
like divine in terms of like
Mhm.
really waiting, like especially with a breach,
Mhm.
like really waiting until it was
100%.
time, your body was ready to do it.
Yes, and I could recognize too, like, they're like, in transition, when I would kind of try to push, I'm like, "Oh, I'm getting pushy," like, it just didn't feel right, and it just, like, made it hurt a lot more, so I'm like, "Okay, like, it's not the right time," and I remember feeling again, like, feeling very similarly in my twin labor and being like, "Oh, okay," like, that was transition, like, I remember starting to feel pushy and, like, getting that feeling, and yeah, so I do think it helped a lot with, like, her coming out well and obviously not having like, with my twin labor, it was about an hour of pushing, so nothing super long, but still waiting until, like, literally the last 5 minutes or so, and then pushing with my contractions, and yeah, so I remember she came out a little bit, and my midwife said something like, "Oh, I can see her," and then they said something like, "It's a butt." Like, it's not a head, she came out butt first. And I think it took me like, I remember a contraction came back and I pushed some more and I was still kind of processing, like, "What did she just say?" Like, A butt?" And I remember feeling and I could feel, like, kind of a butthole, and I was like, "Oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense now why it took so much longer and, like, working so much harder," and yeah, so yeah, and then it was just really, I think, another contraction or 2 and pushing with that, and then she came out. Yeah.
Mhm. Wow. So your twins, were they both born head down?
So baby A was head down, and then baby B was breech. So I've
Okay.
delivered more breech babies now than head down, which is kind of hilarious. But
Wow. That is
yeah.
fascinating, Stephanie, those statistics.
Yeah. And one was in a hospital and one was surprised at home, so
Wow, that is so
yeah.
interesting. Gosh. So do you well, I know that you had the epidural, though you hadn't had it for very long. Like,
Mm,
do you
yeah.
feel a big difference of like what it felt like to push a head down
Mm.
baby out versus these breech babies?
Yeah, honestly, so with my twins, it was definitely it wasn't an epidural where, like, I couldn't feel anything, so I'm
Mhm.
really grateful for that, like, I was like, I could still feel a lot of pressure and, like, what was happening, but honestly, I don't really notice a difference. It's a good
Yeah.
I feel like too, my twins were because they were premature, they were about 4.5 pounds each when
Mm.
they were born, so definitely smaller babies. Jolene was, I think, 7 pounds, 10 ounces, so definitely a much bigger baby. And then in addition to that being folded in half 'cause she
Yeah.
was breech. So, yeah. But, yeah, I don't think I could tell you if there was a difference that I noticed just besides, like, not having the epidural. I felt so like, that was my favorite parts of labor. I remember
Oh,
I just, like, screamed so loud, but in, like, such an empowering way of, like, "This is over. We're doing it."
yes.
Like and it just felt so great to push and for her
Mm.
to, like, come out. Yeah.
Wow. Oh my gosh, that is beautiful. That is so amazing. Well, then what was it like? So you've just pushed out this breech baby. Surprise. What was that experience like once she was in your arms?
Oh, it was just so sweet. Like, I remember definitely, like, getting so teary and just being like, oh, like, I remember the thing I kept saying was like, "I just get to hold my baby and no one's gonna take her from me. I get to, like, just sit here and hold her," and my, husband was there and also my twin daughters were there. One of them got a little bit upset during when I started screaming and stuff, so the midwife's assistant, like, took her out a little bit and
Mhm.
but one of my twins, she was only 2.5, and she was just, like, at the edge of the tub the whole time watching, like, just so enamored, and they were just so in awe too of, like, "This is our baby sister," and they talked about it for weeks that they got to see, like, baby sister come out of mommy's body in the tub, like, just so sweet. And so just such a amazing feeling, like, finally being at home and having my like, little family around me.
Mhm.
My girls got to be there and, like, meet their sister right away, and it was just so incredible. Definitely it was if I'm being totally honest too, it was definitely a different feeling of, like with my twin birth, I remember immediately after being like, "I feel like Superwoman. I'm gonna do that again tomorrow. Like, this is awesome." It definitely it was a little bit more of a pause for me and kinda like that. Like, you see these, like, dreamy home births on Instagram, and you're like, like, having it play out a little differently for me of being such a long labor and such an intense labor and so much harder than my first,
Yeah.
that I remember telling my midwife, I was honestly like, Should I feel bad for feeling this way? Like, I don't feel like I wanna do this again tomorrow." Like, that was really, really hard. Like, it was not an easy labor, but she was just so encouraging of, like, "That was really hard, and, like, you should be so proud of yourself," and just, like, and with time like, now I'm like, "Oh, yeah, like, I'm doing a home birth
Mhm.
again, like, no question," and it is funny you forget some of it too, and I think that helps, but
Lessons.
yeah. Yes. Yeah, so it's like kind of a both and of, like, being so proud of it. It also was so hard, which I feel like sometimes isn't talked about sometimes of, like,
Mhm.
yeah, like, there were some points where I'm like, "Oh my goodness, like, this is so." I think it also maybe was hard because I went into it being like, my first labor was 4 hours, and I felt great, and it was awesome, and then having it be such a different experience. But I look back and I'm like, "Wow, I'm so proud of myself, like, I did that," and then I got to be home in the comfort of my own home and make whatever choices I wanted, and my provider was
Mhm.
gonna, like, just support me all the way through, and yeah, just amazing in that way.
Gosh. And one of the things if we're looking at that experience, I imagine that it was really apparent to you, I am going to need to recover. Like I'm going to need to take
Yes.
recovery
Mhm.
seriously because this birth experience
Mhm.
was intense. And I do wonder if you had had this super fast quick birth with this third baby, what
Mhm.
would that have done to your recovery? I'm sure that you
Mhm.
would have known, of course I need to recover, but like that
100%.
necessity of like, I
Mhm.
need to recover,
Yes.
you know?
100%. Yeah, like, almost that, like, okay, like, it's so important that I'm, like, staying in bed, and even
Mhm.
for me, like, even mentally, just allowing myself to rest and to not constantly being, like, on Instagram or doing things or whatever, like, just staying in bed, and yeah, 100%, I can see that.
Wow. So what was your postpartum experience like? What has it been like? Because you're
Mhm.
10 months, you're still postpartum.
Yeah, yeah. It's been so great. I feel like again, like so my husband, he's at home. He's a stay-at-home dad now, and so he like and he's gotten very good at cooking over the past couple years. So that has been a huge blessing. Like postpartum, he'd bring me the best food and yeah, honestly so different from my first cuz the first postpartum was spent just like constantly walking
Mhm.
back and forth to the NICU, sitting like in bright lights with all this beeping, all these new people all the time, trying to learn to breastfeed for the first time like as a mom and like going from that experience to then this experience, I what told Michael, I'm like, "Don't expect me to leave my bedroom for 2 weeks. Like, I'm gonna
Mhm.
make sure I stay in there and I wanna stay in bed." And I do think that helps so much my recovery, like, even like I mentioned my pelvic floor earlier, like, it's and I've worked with a pelvic floor therapist too in my pregnancies, and that's helped a lot, but even just, like, having that, like, sacred time to just rest so much the first couple of weeks, I do really think helped my recovery a lot, and it's been a lot faster this time and just feeling a lot stronger than I did after my first pregnancy, and so, yeah, honestly, overall and I would say even overall, she's been our most simple baby and very easy to please in a lot of ways, and it's just one, and so it was just even, like and I learned so much more about, like, safe co-sleeping and like all those different things that even I kind of thought about with my twins, but even logistically, that would have been really hard to do with 2 babies. And so getting to do that, and I felt so much more rested. Like we had, again, she was born at like 9 p.m. So it was like 11:30. Everything was kind of wrapped up. My midwife left and we could go to bed at like almost a normal-ish time.
Yeah.
And so kind of starting off postpartum like that was so nice. And so
Mm.
overall, yeah, and she's such a sweet baby. I just love her so much. So it's just
Oh.
been so nice to like have such a lot more a postpartum that just feels so much more restful and simple. It's been very, very nice.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's beautiful. And 2 big sisters that are at that age of just like so interested, I'm sure, like
Oh
wanting to
yeah.
be involved. Oh.
Yes. I do feel like that's a huge blessing of having twins first. Too, is like they've always been used to splitting our time. And
Yeah.
so we like the transition from having like our twin toddlers, they're about 2.5 years, and then having our third, like they just absolutely adore her. And there hasn't really been a lot of like jealousy or huge like mood changes or behavioral changes adding another baby. And so that's been a huge blessing too of like I think because they're used to like, oh, like we always like we have a sibling already and they're just at a good age, like introducing her. They're like, oh, this is our baby too. They call her my baby all the time. Like my baby Jolene's gonna come hang out with me here.
Oh,
It's just
so sweet.
so sweet. It's just the
Oh my
best.
goodness. That when you were talking about having one of your daughters just, at the pool, kind of looking
Mhm.
over, it just reminded me of my birth with my second daughter. My oldest was two and a
Oh.
half. And it was the same thing. She's just at the
Yeah.
birth pool. She kept trying to put her toys in the birth pool. I just remember my husband like, Janie, stop, Janie,
Oh.
stop. Like you can hear it on the video,
Oh.
like, Janie, stop. Like
Yeah. Oh, that's so sweet. I loved it. Yeah. It was so sweet. And she's my twin that like she almost I feel like she has this like understanding of someone like a few years older. Like she just kind
Oh,
of like
wow.
like understands a lot of things more. And so her like she was just in awe. Like even though I'm sitting there screaming so loud, she was just like not even really phased. She just sat there like mommy's working, baby's gonna
Wow.
come. Like, yeah.
Oh, that's
So
so
sweet.
amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, Stephanie. You have posted some really beautiful stuff about your births on Instagram. I know I've seen it.
Mhm.
Would you mind sharing your Instagram information for those who are interested?
Yeah, sure. So my Instagram is at Stephanie Lynn Case. That's for my business as well. So it's like a mixture of my life and my life as a business coach. And I also do have at the time, you can also link this if you want. It's at Stephanie Lynn Case Backup. And it was my old account that I used to do a lot of like content creation, especially when I had my twins, becoming a mom, learning to breastfeed. That's a lot of what I shared. And so if anyone wants to like go back and look at that too, it has a lot of I have a lot of saved stories, like highlights and posts on there too, with like talking about my birth and my experience like postpartum and all of that.
Oh, perfect. We will absolutely do that. As we're wrapping this up, I know that we've kind of talked about these themes throughout, and one of them really like that I see is just that your ability to make decisions,
Mhm.
despite what the norm might be. Is there anything you want to share about that or any other themes that you've noticed throughout your birth as we're wrapping up?
Yeah, I would just say, like, I think something that I think about is how sometimes it's so easy to feel like maybe even like you're doing something wrong as a mom or you're not sure or like what should you do, but just like listening to even your intuition of like where do I feel led in this and what do I want to do, and do I feel like the benefit outweighs the risks of this, or is this going to tell me something that I would want to know that would change what kind of decision I would want to make. And at least for me, like having that knowledge and then also like pairing that with intuitively making decisions for what I wanted was so helpful in both labors. And like even going into being transferred into the hospital, like I already knew a lot of what to expect and what they were going to do, and it didn't feel like all these things were just happening to me, but I
Mm.
was like, okay, I understand what they're doing when they're putting this thing on my belly and why they're doing it, even though I'm like, I don't really want this on my belly, but that's why they're doing it. Or like I understand like just a lot of what was going on. So it still felt empowering in a way of like, okay, like I don't feel like it's just something I'm like I don't understand. I don't get anything that's happening. And all this stuff is just now happening to me. And so that was really empowering for me. And then again, like in the second one, like for me, like with getting a ton of ultrasounds or doing cervical checks, or it wouldn't have told me something that would have changed what I would have wanted for my birth. And so I'm like, why would I? For me, it just didn't feel necessary. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to lean into my intuition with that. And turns out I ended up
Yeah.
having a breech home birth because of it. But that's like exactly like when I think in my mind, it's exactly what I would have wanted. Like I like, you know, having a midwife that has that being trained in breech, who understands and can help if that happens, if that does occur. But yeah, just ultimately like leaning into that intuition. I feel like it's especially now, like there's just so much information even thrown at you online of like, do things this way or do things this way or do this, or oh, you're supposed to do this. But like really figuring out for yourself, like what's the best option for me and making a choice based on that, I feel like has led me really well in both labors and both births.
Yes, both labors, both births, and then forever throughout motherhood. Like, how
Mhm.
many
Yes.
times do we rely on that which we learn in the birth process so beautifully, you know? So,
100%.
oh, I think that's beautiful, Stephanie. And this has been so
Mhm.
fascinating. You have two beautiful, very different birth experiences that have really just grown you into such a well rounded mother. So, thank you, Stephanie, so much for sharing your stories. Thank you so much for coming on the Happy Home Birth podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me. This was so fun.
Time for our educational tidbit. In this week's episode, we heard from a mother who experienced two breech births. So let's take this time to dive in a little deeper on the topic of breech. Now, there are several types of breech presentations. Frank breech is when your baby's legs are folded up against their body. A complete breech occurs when baby's in more of a sitting position with their legs crossed. And the term footling breech is used to describe a baby where one or both feet are down below the bottom. If you find out that your baby is in a breech position towards the end of your pregnancy, you may be offered an ECV, an external cephalic version. Please remember that this procedure is, in fact, a procedure, and just like with anything else, there are risks to it. One of the common scenarios being that the ECV itself may break the amniotic sac. Now, interestingly, my most recent baby was in the breech position at the 36-week mark, and my husband and I decided to try to encourage him into a head down position. Not forcing it to happen, but encouraging him if it were the best position. Now, remember, this is not a formula I'm prescribing, it's just me telling you what we did. I chose to take homeopathic pulsatilla 200C. I did lots of inversions, and you can find some good options on spinningbabies.com for that. And with their forward leaning inversion, I would have my husband come behind me and jiggle my bum really firmly while I was inverted. And believe it or not, I did not have to beg him to do that. In fact, I'm pretty sure he requested, maybe we should work on the breech baby again after the first time. I had chiropractic adjustments. And then what actually caused him to turn? Well, after a set of inversions and having taken a dose of pulsatilla, we placed an ironing board diagonally against our couch. And I laid on it with my husband holding my ankles in place at the top. So my head was down towards the ground, ankles up to the top. I put an ice pack on the top of my belly and whoosh, that baby flipped right around into a head down position and he stayed that way. Now, here's something we really need to discuss. You will hear so many people say, breech is a variation of normal. There's no need to worry about breech babies. And that is so true. Breech is a variation of normal. However, that does not mean that there are zero additional risks to a breech baby. That's untrue. There is a higher incidence of complications. So, this is where your sovereignty and your ability to decide what your level of risk tolerance is critical. Which risk do you prefer is really what we're asking here. The risks that come along with a cesarean section, the risks of trying to give birth vaginally to a breech baby in the hospital, knowing that they will potentially add to the difficulty of the task and may not possibly be well trained, or the risk of giving birth to a breech baby at home. I also want you to consider your midwife, your care provider. What type of knowledge and comfort do they have regarding breech birth? Have they completed any training? What is their approach? Are they hands on? Are they hands off? I have a very beautiful article linked in the show notes by Jane Evans inside of a magazine called Essentially Mediers that reviews breech birth. Jane focuses on the importance of breech birth versus breech delivery. Now, what's the difference? Her point is that the research shows that allowing mothers to birth their babies unhindered and without interference provides the safest way out for a breech baby. Mothers will instinctively move their bodies in the appropriate ways to release their baby when providers keep their hands off and do not try to force the baby out, i.e., deliver the baby. Now, having a care provider who understands how the mechanics of breech birth work and are comfortable with it, trained in it, understand when something is going sideways, they're experienced with it, this makes a whole lot of difference. So, that is a big chunk of kind of heavy information, but I want you to understand something. Good preparation for a breech birth is the same as good preparation for a quote regular birth. It's acknowledging your fear, releasing it, gaining intuition and trust in your body and your baby, learning about the birthing process and how it unfolds, learning how to use our bodies well. It's all of the things that I've put together for you inside of Happy Home Birth Academy. So if you're ready to join today, click the link in the show notes and use the code podcast for 10% off. I'll see you inside. All right, let's jump to this week's episode roundup. So as we jump in, I've got a few important topics on my mind. Number one, I cannot help but start with Stephanie's mindset. Wow. As soon as she heard that she was pregnant with twins, her reaction was delight. Her first thought wasn't, oh my goodness, how are we going to do this? But instead, oh my goodness, what a blessing. This could be seen throughout her story. Even when she shared about her experience with the NICU and the obvious difficulty that had to have come from having her plans change and giving birth in the hospital and then spending weeks at that hospital, it's very clear to me that Stephanie has taken these experiences and learned to look at them with positive eyes, quickly pulling out the goodness in how things unfolded, even while acknowledging the areas that she wouldn't have chosen for herself by any means. I feel this is so worth highlighting. Truly, it can be the easier route to see all of the things that didn't happen the way we expected and then find ourselves hanging out in that upset place for days, months, years, even decades. There is something so powerful in being able to take our story, to see it for what it truly is, the good parts, the hard parts, acknowledging them all, and then choose the way we are going to interact with that event. Sometimes this requires help and support. For me, it requires listening prayer with Jesus. But when we are able to genuinely process our births and many other intense situations, not just birth, we are able to accept them, see the good parts, perhaps even focus on those, and move on in our lives even more empowered, more confident, and filled with more gratitude. Stephanie really embodies this, and I hope you were as encouraged by that as I was. And next, I love the way Stephanie thoughtfully interacted with her birthing choices. For example, she could have been convinced by the first doctor she spoke with at the hospital who told her she would need a cesarean. Instead, she and her midwife sought another provider. Another example could be seen in her second birthing experience where she knew that she didn't want to be checked. She knew that there was no information at that time that she would gain from a vaginal exam that would change anything about her plans of how she would give birth. This resulted in a beautiful surprise breech birth with no need to transport into the hospital. Education combined with intuition. Wow, it's a powerful thing, my friends. And it serves us so well, not only during birth, but throughout the whole of motherhood. What a great episode. Okay, my friends, that's all I've got for you for today. I'll see you back here next week.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Are you looking to extend the home birth support, encouragement, and education? Join us in our Facebook group, Happy Home Birth Podcast Community, and check us out on Instagram at Happy Home Birth Podcast.